Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Soul Goals Podcast. I'm Dawn, and I'm so glad you're joining me today. This podcast is dedicated to bringing people's stories to light and hearing their journeys of inspiration and self-growth. But it's also about connection and knowing that you are not alone. Each week, I get the chance to sit down and talk with an amazing soul, someone I've had the blessing of either meeting or following in my life. I am so grateful for my guests. Their openness and their vulnerability, it is unmatched as we share heartfelt conversations together about both their challenges and their triumphs. I hope that you can grab some inspiration and connection from my guests and their stories. I know I certainly have with each conversation. What an honor to sit with these brave souls. Everyone has a story, folks. And every story matters. Hi, everybody. This is Dawn, and it's another episode of the Soul Goals Podcast. I'm so glad you chose to join us today to hear another amazing story from an amazing person. Gosh, I feel like I say it all the time. I said that like 2 episodes ago. I say amazing all the time, but it's very true. These are people that are sharing so intimately details of their life to be able to help other people know a little bit more about what they experienced in case they're experiencing it, and also to know that they're not alone and to give them a foundation from where to learn from, where to pull from. If you feel like you're lost, you feel like you're struggling, this is the place to come. This is a great inspirational, motivational place for you to find that that you may need for your day. So today I have a great old friend of mine. We worked together in Nashville. I don't remember. I was to say like the years. It's been a long time. So I don't even, do you remember the year that we
were together? 2002, 2003, probably until, let's see here. I moved out of Nashville 2006. So somewhere in that time frame.
So early 2000s, Laura and I worked together as personal trainers at a small training boutique, and it was great. She's super sweet. We connected right away. I was like, oh, love you, girl. And then you got married and got swept off to Colorado. And that's where you're from though, originally, right?
It is. Yeah. Okay. So just returning home.
Yeah. And your husband is originally from the Kentucky.
Correct.
Area. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So brought him out west.
And he's liking it.
He does like it. He loves all the major sports teams. That's been what he's really enjoyed, the sports scene. Yes. So get some of those fun things and, Denver and the big city life.
Yeah. And also true. You just said before we hit the record, it's our first snow day.
It is snowing.
It's October 28th right now.
They're saying like 6 to 10 inches.
What?
It's not just like a little dusting. It's like you're getting snow.
Yeah.
So we're just hunkering in this weekend, and that's okay. So I can chat with you, and this is a highlight.
I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you're safe in your nice little space with from the 6 to 10 inches. And I don't envy you, because right now in Nashville, I think it's probably closing on 80 degrees, which is weird. It's going to cool down next week. So you're not missing anything for very long anyway,
but still, those are the days I miss in Nashville.
I agree. So I asked Laura to be a guest on this podcast because 2000 and what year was it? 2018. Their world as a family was kind of turned inside out when their youngest child was diagnosed with anaplastic large cell lymphoma. And Chase was how old at that time?
He was 10 years old.
10 years old, right? So Chase has gone on to go through some really great recovery, and he's in a space now where he's an active 10th grader now, and he's doing great.
He is. He's 5 years in remission.
Great.
It doesn't take away any of the worries.
Yeah.
I just, to be honest, like even this morning, he kind of had a weird cough, and I'm looking at my husband, and he kind of knows that look when I give him a certain look and he gives me that certain look back, like it's fine. Yeah. It's just a cold. Yeah. So that is something that we live with now just because of what happened.
Right. And I feel like if we go back in time, I want to hear that the real reason I wanted you to come on is to hear your side of it and to hear what it is that you have learned from all of this to be able to glean and to give that information to other individuals that may be going through the same thing, and to also give awareness to pediatric cancer. Because, like when we talked the other day, I know you were saying there's really not a lot of study that's been done around it, funding that's been done to it. Cancer in general and as a whole has been researched, but for the pediatric side of it, it's a much different story you found, correct?
It is. It's actually only 4% of federal funding is allocated only to pediatrics. So it is a
Wow.
drastic difference. And so when you are in this world, you find that out very quickly. And so you really want to jump in to see how you can help, because when you make friends, and I still have a very close group of kind of cancer mom friends, we call each other, right? And
Mhm.
we know that we would do anything to help each other, help anyone else, but we also are all in that same mission of
Mm.
really trying to draw awareness and attention to what needs to be done for pediatric cancer.
Yes. Yeah. So let's jump back to
Mhm.
August of 2018,
Mhm.
when Chase was diagnosed. But prior to that, he had symptoms, but you didn't think a ton about it when it was starting, correct?
Yeah, so he started probably, it was mid-July.
Okay.
He started complaining of jaw pain.
Oh.
But he was a young boy. He was really active in soccer at the time.
Hmm.
He was thriving on the soccer field. I mean, even
Hmm.
his coach said, Chase is killing it out there, right?
Yeah.
Comes home from a trampoline play date with one of his friends and said, my jaw hurts. And we're like, did you clench your jaw when you landed too hard?
Yeah. Did
He's
you
like,
fall and you or
something.
something? Yeah.
He's a
Yeah.
boy, right? He's like, I don't think so. And I'm like, I'm sure you did. You just don't remember.
Yeah. Because he's
He's
10.
10.
Yeah.
Yeah. So active,
Active.
rambunctious,
Hmm.
like, all that kind of boy stuff. And so
Hmm.
as the week went on, his jaw started getting more and more sore, where like he couldn't open it all the way. He was having a hard time eating solid foods.
Oh,
His
wow.
jaw started to swell. And so I have a good friend that is a dentist. And
Hmm.
so I brought him in to see her.
Hmm.
And they said it was I believe it's parietal gland,
Okay.
which can be infected. And so she's like, we're going to get some strong antibiotics. But if these don't work, be prepared that you might need to go to the ER to get IV antibiotics because you want to treat the infection quickly.
Correct. Yeah.
So
And
our
I've heard
mind
of
was
that
just
before.
there,
Yeah.
right?
That's
Yeah.
it.
Like
Mhm.
you just never know. Sometimes things that can go south or get infections in weird places. And you're
Right.
like, well, we'll just take the medicine we need.
Right.
So did that, but then he started having
Mhm.
swelling moving down his neck to his lymph node,
Okay. Just
um,
on one side?
just on one side.
Okay.
Went to his pediatrician a couple times. We have since changed pediatricians
Okay.
because she didn't seem to really take it with high importance.
Uh,
And so between visits to her, then visits to urgent care, we finally went to the ER.
okay.
And they thought the same thing. They thought it was that parietal gland infection. We're going to admit him to do IV antibiotics for a week, and then that's it. He'll be good
Right.
to go. And so we were in the hospital that week, him and I. My son was still taking care of my daughter because she was just 12 and in activities.
Mhm.
And so him and I just kind of hung out for the week. And it never really dawned on me to think it might have been something more serious.
Yeah.
And my husband later told me that he was beginning to think that it might be something, but he didn't really tell me.
Yeah.
So the hospital we were at released us and said, even though it's still very swollen, just give it time. It'll get better.
Oh,
So
okay.
they discharged us, even though he was feeling pretty bad, low grade
Yeah.
fevers, all the signs of infection that you would think.
Yeah.
So we go home after a couple days. He continues to get worse and he gets more and more swollen. So finally, we go to a different pediatrician at our office. And I give him all the credit in the world because he was the one who really listened to us.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm going to call Children's Hospital and you're going to go right away.
Okay. Okay.
So kind of thrown in and made that first trip to the emergency room at our children's hospital.
Yeah.
They did admit him and said, we're going to do a biopsy, continue the antibiotics, And we're really going to do that kind of deeper dive to figure out what might be happening.
Yes.
They asked about, travel, or like we had gone camping a couple of weeks before. So really every single thing they really looked into.
Okay, good.
Did the biopsy, sent us home a day later and said, we'll be in touch.
Mm-hmm.
And then not even 24 hours later, I was working with some clients and got a phone call. And the doctor told me over the phone that your son has cancer.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Just ripping the Band-Aid off.
Laura.
So I was literally with 4 longtime
I'm tearing up
clients.
right now. What
Well,
did
and
you
my
do?
Chase was upstairs because he wasn't feeling well.
Uh-huh.
And I told my clients what I had just heard, and I needed to leave. And then I called my husband and told him about the phone call and said, you need to get home right away.
Yeah.
So I waited until he was home to go upstairs to tell Chase because I didn't want to handle that conversation alone.
Yeah.
So we had that conversation. And I think the most heartbreaking thing that still makes me emotional, I think always will, is Chase's reaction because he started sobbing and asked if he was going to die.
That was the first thing he asked.
That was the first thing he asked at 10 years old. Yeah.
And as a mom, like I don't even know what I would say to my child in that moment. Like I'm emotional for you. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we just said, no, we're getting it taken care of. It'll be fine. We're going to be with you every step of the way. Even though we were just as unsure and uneasy.
Yeah.
But that's probably one of the most challenging things with a child who has pediatric cancer is you have to remain strong for them and for your other children.
Yeah. Because at that point, you just said earlier, you had a 12-year-old at the same time.
Correct. Yeah. So they said, you have 60 minutes to get back to the hospital, pack a bag.
Whoa, an hour? Like
he had a very, very aggressive type which is why he got sick within a matter of, 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so it was already pretty far along. And so with pediatrics, that is one major difference is the first 48 hours are whirlwind because they get you into surgery within hours of getting the diagnosis to get their port put in.
Yeah.
They start treatment right away. And you are rushed in from thinking that your life was fine and your kid just had an infection to all of a sudden you are thrown into a whole new world, not knowing which way is up and which way is down.
Gosh. So by the time you got to the hospital, they knew what their forward movement was going to be. They had a plan in place for you?
They did, yes. So we met with our oncologist and she gave us the exact diagnosis of anaplastic large cell lymphoma. Right. They mentioned that, they were going to go do a spinal tap to see if there was cancer cells in the spine. They were going to do the full PET scan to see if it had spread and where to diagnose the stage. And then they're literally going into surgery that same day to get their port put in.
All of that. When you arrived at the hospital 60 minutes later.
Yep.
Basically an hour to 2 hours after getting that information.
Yep. Correct. Yeah. So very hard.
Yeah. And then you say you have to be a pillar for your child. You have to be very formidable about it's going to be okay. What did you do privately? Like, how did you take care of your emotional state? Because I'm interested to know, I think that mothers and parents in general, the focus has to be on the patient, has to be on the child and taking care of them and addressing what has to be done. But the emotions that you go through, I don't think unless you're in that, like you're with moms that have gone through it before. You were so early in the stage.
Those first 48 hours, you don't really have time to even think about taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
After those first few days, and then he was admitted into a room with his first round of chemo, and starting to kind of meet the nurses and like meet the staff. And, I don't want to say get the hang of it, but you're like starting to at least get used to your new normal
You're
in a
finding a
very
routine.
weird way.
Yeah.
And so then my husband and I would take times, I would even just walking around the hospital grounds outside
Yeah.
and just taking time away to sob, to process, to call friends,
Mm.
family, whatever it was.
Mhm.
And then one of those key memories that, when Chase would be sleeping at night in the hospital bed, and my husband and I, sometimes we would stay there together, sometimes we would take turns, but
Mhm.
they have one full size couch that rolls into a bed.
Yeah.
And I remember us just kind of comforting each other, just hugging each other and just crying together at night.
Yeah.
Like Chase was asleep. We were trying to keep it down and be quiet, but
Yeah.
we really did come together. And I think that that's not always the case. Sometimes stress can really drive families apart.
Right.
But for us, it was also that defining moment that we had each other and we were the only ones who knew what we were going through
Ah,
and knew
good.
the dynamics of our family. So we really
Mhm.
came together and relied on each other.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point.
Mhm.
Um, again, I'll probably say this phrase numerous times through this talk. Like, I can't imagine.
Mhm.
The thing that I think shocks me is the quickness of it. And it makes sense when you talk about it being from a pediatric standpoint, like
Mhm.
it's fast. And especially what he was diagnosed with,
Mhm.
what being so aggressive. Is that unusual for pediatric cancer to be aggressive?
Um,
Do you know that
so when
statistic?
it comes to any newly diagnosed child, they typically move that quickly. Their
Okay.
bodies are smaller.
Yeah.
Things can spread quicker. They
And they're
need to
growing.
get
Yeah,
it.
they're
Yeah.
developing.
Yeah. So they do not waste time.
Okay.
His ended up being stage 3. So it had spread to his lungs and his spleen.
Oh, Laura, I didn't know that.
Yep.
Oh,
But the
wow.
wonderful thing is, and in a strange way, we felt fortunate with his diagnosis
Okay.
because they did say from the get go, they're like, this has a 90% survival rate.
Okay, that's great.
Lymphoma is one that has been studied a little bit more. Lymphoma and leukemia are the two
Mhm.
most commonly diagnosed types of cancer for pediatrics.
Mhm.
So they have been studied a little bit more. So they had an option for a clinical trial for Chase, things like that. Whereas after meeting other families who had diagnosis of sarcoma or other things, the prognosis was not as good. So
Yeah.
in that strange way, even in that moment, we still felt grateful that
Yes.
that's what we were facing.
Yeah.
Our hearts went out to the other families
Yeah.
because their prognosis was not as good.
Yeah.
So we really did try to focus on that positive side of it.
That's great. It gave you a
So
piece of relief almost in the
it
world of
did.
this kind of this cloud that you were in. Yeah.
It did. And there's always unknowns, and we were
Mhm.
still very scared.
Mhm.
But also knowing the numbers and hearing it from the doctors and hearing what
Different.
they said about with the clinical trial and the additional chemo, like they felt good about it.
Yes.
So we were just putting all of our trust in them. And I remember at one point, the chief medical officer, when he was asking if we wanted to do the clinical trial, I asked if it was your child, what would you do? And he said 100% yes.
That's a great question. I mean, that's a great question. I don't think that would have been the first thing I would have thought of.
Yeah, well, it's hard
No.
because they give you all these packets of science information, and unless you're well versed in that terminology, like
You don't
you're not,
know.
and you don't have the ability at that time to
Yeah.
even read it.
Yeah.
Like your mind is not there. And so
Yeah.
when it came down to putting our trust in the doctors, that was the question that came to mind.
Yeah. Tell me about his treatment overall. I know from following along in the Caring
Mhm.
Bridge that 7 to 8 months for like the 7 to 8 treatments that he had to go through. So 8, is that correct?
So it was 6 official rounds, but
Okay.
then their first round, they don't really count as part of that.
Okay.
So it was like 7 total. But for him, since he was on the clinical trial and on more drugs because of that,
Mm,
then each round he was admitted to the hospital for a week.
okay.
So it was every 21 days was a round. So by the
Okay.
time you were in the hospital, got discharged, you were home for a week before you were getting ready to go back.
Oh, wow. That fast.
So it was a lot of time in the hospital. So shorter treatment, very intense.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's what his journey kind of looked like.
How did how did he tolerate the treatments as a whole?
It was hard. Thankfully, he had some minor setbacks, but
Mhm.
he never had any major infections or anything like that, which we were very, very grateful for,
Yeah.
because that's what sometimes can sneak in and really take things a totally different direction.
Yes.
So he still had all the normal side effects, right? Losing his hair. He was on a
Mm.
lot of steroids, so he gained, gosh, I think 20 or 25 pounds. And for his little body, he didn't really
Yeah.
look like himself. So that
Yeah.
was really difficult.
Yeah.
Um,
Does he ever look back at pictures or things of that in that time now as a healthy 10th grader?
yeah, sometimes it'll pop up, right, on like memories or things
Right.
like that. And it is hard to look at for all of us, especially for him,
Yeah.
just because I don't think he even recognized himself.
Yeah. How did he, as a 10-year-old, I mean, if you think about, like, I think about my kids when they were 10, like,
Mhm.
their emotional state is kind of all over the place anyway,
Mhm.
whether they're healthy or whatever's happening with them. So, how did he, as a 10-year-old boy, emotionally tolerate what was going on? Like, what was he saying to you and your husband? What was he?
He was scared,
Mhm.
but thankfully Chase is one of the coolest kids around because he is the most calm, easygoing, positive kids.
Yes.
Now
Mhm.
maybe he just didn't share everything with me, and that's okay because I'm
Yeah.
sure he had some internal thoughts and emotions too that maybe he didn't even know how to verbalize.
Yeah.
Um, but for the most part, I mean, we tried to keep his focus. Like, for example, because he was an athlete.
Mhm.
And
Right.
so the nurses would challenge him to how many laps he could walk around the oncology floor.
Okay.
And there was one when he was feeling good, of course,
Uh-huh.
but there was one day that, he's bored, we're bored, and he's just wanting to try to push his body. He did
Mhm.
100 laps. He
What?
did 100.
That's crazy.
And the nurses kept cheering him on every time he'd go
Oh.
around. And so that was just him. It's still him. He's got such a great, great personality.
Mhm.
That I know my daughter's personality being totally different, it would have been very different,
Yeah.
right? If it was her going through something like that.
For sure. Mhm.
Um, so not that you want any of your kids to go through that, but
Right.
just his personality, he really handled things really, really maturely, even
Yeah.
for the age of 10,
Mm,
and was just
mhm.
focusing on getting done because he wanted to get back to school and get back to his friends and sports.
Right. Yeah, 'cause his life just completely went stop,
Yep.
and we're gonna take a right-hand turn. How
Mhm.
did your daughter 'cause she's 2 years older than Chase, how
Mhm.
did she do through all of this? Like, what went down with her? How were her feelings? How was
Mhm.
her interaction? Because I know, like, when you think about it, like, your focus had to be
Mhm.
on him and getting him well to get him to this next phase of life.
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit challenging because before he was diagnosed, she had been struggling with her mental health for a few years.
Okay.
And so she was already dealing with a lot of anxiety,
Mhm.
depression, OCD, kind of some sensory issues. So
Mhm.
we had always really focused more on her
Okay.
just to kind of keep her going and try to figure out the best path for her.
Right.
And so it was a definite shift to us having to focus on Chase.
Mhm.
But I'm also grateful because we had gotten her, because of all that work that we were putting into her,
Mhm.
we had gotten her to a more stable place right before he got diagnosed.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean because our family was separated for most of those 6 months.
Well, that was gonna be my next question, because if
Mhm,
you're in the hospital for a week at a time,
mhm.
one of you has to be there with your 10-year-old. I mean, you wouldn't yeah, I wouldn't want to leave my
Yeah,
child there by himself. Yeah, and I
yeah.
know you
So
didn't. So
I
you would
pretty
have a
much
full
stopped
family.
working. So I was working
Okay.
with him Monday through Friday. My husband would go for the weekends.
Okay.
But my daughter relied on me because I was kind of that person to calm her down.
Yeah, you're the
And
mom.
yeah, so then
Yeah.
when I wasn't there, there were plenty of nights when she would call me having a panic attack. And I'd be trying to talk her down and calm her down. And my husband didn't know what to do to help her. And then I'd start crying because I'm taking care of my son who's, battling cancer and in the hospital bed. And then I'm trying to take care of my, daughter from 45 minutes away, just,
Yeah.
via phone. So yeah, it was
Overwhelming.
hard. It was overwhelming. It was very overwhelming.
How did you get through that?
Just one step at a time. I mean, honestly, right? One day at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think obviously a prognosis like this, or a diagnosis rather, puts a lot of things in perspective and
Mhm.
it shifts everybody in the family. But then you think about everything that you had going on and you're just, that doesn't go away either.
No, it doesn't. I was trying to keep up with all the activities of my daughter's school
Yeah.
and, dance and all of that. Her staff, she was at a charter school, so
Hmm.
kind of a smaller environment, and the staff really rallied around her. My daughter even did a fundraiser for cancer kiddos for Christmas.
Oh,
And so they helped support her in like collecting gifts and wrapping and then donating those. So um, we were all trying to just do what we could,
yes.
even in the midst of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that perspective that you get, you suddenly realize that those small things that people tend to focus on naturally
Yeah.
are not as important as we think they are.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest takeaway with anything that
Mhm,
is large in our life that just totally upsets our regular routine that we know and that we've become comfortable with.
mhm,
And when it just totally sets you in motion to a different thing, it really
mhm.
does. It's a huge perspective dive.
It is. It is. But that's also been one of probably the greatest gifts for my family now
Yeah.
is because, there can be things like, Chase plays high school sports
Mhm.
and you see families getting all upset about playing time or which team they make. And we're just glad to be there.
Right.
Right. And so we really have that gift of perspective where we don't have to get all tied up in knots over those things that at the end of the day, yes, they can be fun, but it's not as important as we might think.
Yeah. Gosh,
Mhm,
you just drop the mic, walk away right there because
mhm.
that is absolutely unequivocally one of the best things ever. And you just put it talking about perspective, you just put it all in perspective right there.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm,
when you're facing a situation that could you didn't know at that point. It could have
mhm.
gone one way or the other. So
Exactly.
when did you know during treatments? When did you feel or the doctors feel like, "Hey, this is headed the direction we want it to go?"
Mhm.
Or was it not until the end that they were like, "Okay, we feel good about where things are now?"
So I'm trying to think back. I think after even the first or second round, and then for sure after the third round,
Mhm.
they do all the scans again. They're taking blood every day when you're inpatient too.
Mhm.
But I'm pretty sure it was at halfway point that they did a complete scan again and did all the tests. And they did say that his body was responding to chemo. And
Right.
so that, I mean, even though there is still some of that unknown, just to know that his body was responding well to the drugs, it was doing what it was supposed to be doing
Yes.
was a huge, huge sigh of relief. I mean, we still had half of the journey to go,
Yeah.
but that kind of definitely gave us a little bit more room to breathe
Yes.
before
Yeah.
taking on the second half of that journey.
Was do you think because I know you've talked about like Chase would just he knew, "Okay, I'm gonna get to the end." It's like a ball game. Like, I'm gonna focus and I'm
Yep.
gonna take every second, every minute of my play, and I know it's one step closer to the end goal, which is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna win. That's my
Yep.
goal, is to
Yep.
win.
Yep.
The second half of the treatment, I know in your carrying bridge, you said that was probably one of the tougher times for him.
Mhm.
Can you explain
Mhm.
a little bit more what you
Yeah.
felt? What was that physical? Was that emotional? Was it a little bit of
It was
everything?
a little bit of both, right? Because even though you have the chemo drug saving your child's life, you get the side effects. And
Yes.
so then you're dealing with the side effects. And because the clinical trial he was on, he had to get daily shots for a blood thinner
Okay.
because the drug could cause blood clots. So it was like his poor stomach was so bruised all over the place.
Oh, wow.
Just those other side effects. They can get a lot of mouth sores from the
Mm.
chemo,
Mhm.
the nausea, of course, just so many things, right? And so I think that kind of just is when he started to get beat down a little bit,
Okay.
even though he was on that second half,
Mhm.
it was just getting hard. And then, of course, it was, holidays coming up, right? Like we were in
Oh,
the hospital for
Christmas
Halloween,
and
we
not
were in the
Halloween and
hospital for Thanksgiving.
yeah,
Thankfully, we got home right before Christmas. But I think that's the other thing is as a 10-year-old, like you want to be out doing what everyone else is doing.
right.
And that wasn't a possibility. So I think that also took its toll emotionally on him.
Yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
Um, that all wrapped when was the final, so the diagnosis came in August.
Yeah,
The
August 8th.
August, what day did you say?
August 8th.
August 8th,
Hmm.
the final day where you could say, "We're done."
Hmm.
You weren't declared cancer free just yet, but when you were done with like, "Okay, we are done with the hard part, now we just have
Hmm.
to kind of wait and let your body continue to respond and take this treatment like it has been." How many months elapsed between that?
It was 6 months. So he finished and rang the bell right before Christmas.
Oh, that's a great gift.
It was an amazing gift.
Oh, and you guys got to be together at home.
Yes, which was priceless
Yeah.
after being, going back and forth and apart for so much. And
Yeah.
so it was just nice to be together and just enjoy time with
Yeah.
each other and be home.
And he was done then with the hospital stays, with the treatments at
Hmm.
that point, correct? At
Yeah,
the
we had
same
a lot of visits still because they
okay.
still want to keep an eye on you pretty
Yeah,
closely right afterwards. But
right.
then those slowly get further and further spaced apart. So now he goes once a year. So I
That's
know
amazing.
it is amazing. It's amazing.
Gosh. So after he was done with treatment, he rang the bell. I know he stayed home yet. You guys
Hmm.
chose to have him still do online school while he was
Hmm.
recovering.
Yeah.
I had an episode with a dear friend of ours that had testicular cancer when he was a teenager. And he talked with me about his recovery. And when he was done, and he was like, "Okay, you're free to go back into the world." And
Hmm.
his body was still trying to get back to a normalcy.
Hmm.
How was did Chase have that issue? Did he have
He did. I mean, his immune system was still much weaker too. And so we were still very restrictive
right,
on him going out and really us going out too, right? We were still doing the full sanitization routine when we got home from places or things like that, just to try to protect him.
right.
But then the other thing was him really, because when you're on all those drugs for these kiddos, they can have weird cravings and weird tastes. And it was like
Mhm.
he ate the strangest things, right? So it was like
Okay.
also just getting back to like normalcy of like
Yeah.
normal eating and not being on all the drugs and all the steroids. And he's such a trooper. We have a home gym
Mhm.
and he was determined every day to get back in shape and get stronger. So he was also working out every day.
Oh, that's
I mean,
great,
it
Laura.
was slow to start, but once he started feeling better and getting a little more energy, like I have before and after pictures because he was really trying to take his body back,
Yeah.
so that he could be ready,
Yeah.
to get back on the soccer field and get back on the basketball court.
So he was able to play basketball some in the spring, correct?
He did. He did a couple games. It was towards the end of their season.
Okay.
So obviously his endurance was not great and his
Okay.
strength was not great, but it was just such a huge blessing to see him out in the
Oh,
court at
I can
least
imagine. Yeah.
back to where he wanted to be.
Yeah.
So
When did you see him at like recovered? Where you're like, this we have our boy back.
mhm.
What was that point for you? And when was that? Or describe that point maybe.
I would say so he finished in 2019
Mhm.
and then COVID
Oh my God.
came,
Oh
right?
my God. How can I forget
So
about COVID?
yeah, so that was
Oh,
2020.
wait.
So
So
that was a little bizarre,
well, so
because
he still were
he
you
was
guys
still
in
home.
school?
He was still doing homeschool. My daughter was in school.
Okay.
So they were finishing up the school year. So he was still home, but then of
Wow.
course it altered the course for the following year too.
Yes.
And his immune system, I mean, then it was weaker. Still to this day, it's weaker. The poor guy gets any cold and any virus if anybody walks by him with
Oh,
anything, but
wow.
it was
Yeah.
even worse then. So
Yeah.
really, I would say he went back to school full time in eighth grade. So 2 years ago.
Okay, so he was out for how long? But with
So sixth grade, but then it was COVID and it was like,
yeah,
it
it
was
was
just a
weird.
weird
Yeah.
time. And then, so he still, through all of that, because for him with his immune system, like that was not the time to be sending him to school
Yeah.
because none of us really knew at that point, right?
Yeah.
And it was the unknown.
Yes.
And we really didn't want to take any chances with him.
Mhm.
So, so yeah, so sixth and seventh grade, he did a little bit of in person, but then ended up doing more online school at home.
Right.
And
But
so
he was able to
then
play sports at that
he
point,
was, he
right?
was.
Okay.
Well, I mean, 2020 things were still
It's yeah.
different, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
2021, he got back to that. And then, yeah, starting eighth grade, he chose to go to a different school, a larger school.
Okay.
And I can't tell you how nervous I was because I was like, you're ready for this after being home for the last
2
2.5,
years.
3 years.
3 years. Yeah, 3
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And he's like, I got it, mom.
He was
And he
ready.
did it and he rocked it. So that was the moment that I really was like, okay, he's back.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you said that during all of this, you stopped working. You had to take care of him and also to manage your daughter's stuff as well, just to kind of be
Mhm.
like, I think moms are the glue for the family, man. I'm
Yeah.
not discounting your husband and his fears and his
Mhm.
worries and his contribution at all. I'm not saying that
Mhm.
at all. But as a mom, when
Yeah.
you're describing to me like your daughter is relying on you because there was so much that I mean, you're connected because you're both
Mhm.
females, obviously, but
Mhm.
you when were you able to start back to work then? When did you, because I know you had a career change and that's a big thing for you as well. I'd love
Yeah.
to hear about.
Well, I kind of mostly
Mhm.
stopped working while he was in treatment.
Okay.
But when you're self-employed, you also don't want to not work at all and like let your business dwindle down.
Right.
So if we were home for that week, I would actually try to work with a few clients,
Okay.
just when I could to try to keep things going.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, once he was done with treatment in January, that's when I started back.
Okay. And you
So
went back full-time training at that
I
point,
did,
correct?
I
Okay.
did, I did. So
So now you're working within the cancer arena actually.
I am.
Is that correct?
I went back to my, health and fitness job,
Yeah.
which still passionate about,
Yeah.
but I started volunteering for a local family support organization at the time that had helped us a lot.
Mhm.
And so I started being the one who would call newly diagnosed families if they needed financial resources, housing resources, like whatever it might be. I tried to connect them to those services.
Yes.
And so I would do that after hours, but that quickly became what I felt pulled to.
Yeah.
And even though health and fitness, like I said, is still important to me personally, my passion was kind of gone
Yes. Yeah.
for helping others with that
Yeah.
because I was so focused on these difficult phone calls that I
Mm.
was making and these connections I was making to these families. And I talked to so many families that said, there are no other treatments for my child.
Oh,
And it breaks your heart, right? And that's kind of where we go back to like I at that time almost felt bad because our prognosis, Chase was doing so well.
right.
And so I just really turned to, well, how can I be part of the solution? I'm obviously not going to cure cancer, but
Yeah.
how else can I support to help these families?
Yeah.
Because it's not right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I changed industries about 6 months after that into the nonprofit world
Mhm.
just to help spread awareness, raise funds, be a supporter, be an advocate, to help anyone. Because,
Mhm.
yes, obviously I am passionate about pediatric,
Mhm.
but I also know that anyone who's going through cancer, it is so, so difficult. So no matter what stage of life you're in, everyone needs support. Everyone needs those organizations to rally behind them, to give them the resources, and of course, to raise money to fund research so that science can continue doing what it does. And
Right.
hopefully, down the road, as many kids won't get diagnosed.
Yeah. And that goes back to trying to raise that percentage that you said earlier. The funding
Mhm.
percentage at 4% is just mind boggling.
It
But
is. That's 4% of federal funding. So pediatric cancer specifically relies pretty much solely on private funding for research,
oh,
which is
wow.
why you do see a lot of pediatric nonprofits, because that's the only way that we're really going to make advancements in research.
Well, I mean, wow.
Mhm. It is a wow. And that's where, like, I saw firsthand from talking to these families who would be sobbing to me that there were no treatments left for their child. And there were quite a few of those families that have since lost their children.
Yeah.
And that's what gets me motivated, right?
Yeah.
Because we failed those kids.
Yeah.
And I don't want any other. I mean, unfortunately, it's going to happen. But if I
Mhm.
can do my small part, hopefully, maybe someday it'll make a small difference for someone.
Well, just the awareness of it
Mhm,
is huge because, like, I had no idea those numbers.
mhm,
And I had no idea that the private sector is what's really funding the research
mhm.
mainly for pediatrics.
It is. When I don't think people realize that cancer is the leading cause of death in children, the death by disease, like that is the leading disease for children.
Mm.
And so I don't think people realize, people think, oh, it's rare. And in a way, it is. But, 43 kids are diagnosed every day around the country.
Wow.
That might be a small number, but you think every day what that adds up to over the year and over the years.
Mhm.
And every one of those kids' lives matter.
Right. Absolutely.
Mhm,
And when you said 43, I just keep getting chills every time when
mhm.
you're talking about this. That's a large number to me.
It is. It is. And that's where, they deserve better. And
Yeah.
so we have to do better.
So when you have the opportunity to speak with people, their children
Mhm,
have been newly diagnosed or they're kind of in the weeds of all of it.
mhm,
What are some of the things that you say to them? What is some of the things that you say, that the offerings that you have to give them?
mhm.
I mean, I don't even.
Yeah, I mean, one is connecting them to resources and where we live. We are fortunate throughout the Denver area to have so many great nonprofits, large and small, that can
Mhm,
really help with all kinds of resources. But
mhm.
then the other thing is just offering that relationship, right?
Yeah.
One of my cancer mom friends, her daughter was finishing treatment for leukemia about 2 years after Chase.
Okay.
And I'd always told her, I'm here, call me if you need me. And out of the blue, she just called me one day sobbing,
Oh.
so it's just being that person that,
Mhm.
like, if you need to pick up the phone, if we need to meet up, because no one else gets it. And
Yeah.
even once you're done with treatment, the amount of worry, like, we kind of internally joke about all of our, PTSD, but it's the truth.
It's still there.
It's the
Yeah. It's
truth. And
still there.
so just having that support,
Yeah.
I always say it's that club that you don't want to be a part of,
Right.
but at the same time, the people I've met are remarkable.
Mhm,
And when you meet someone who either their child or they're newly diagnosed,
mhm.
you instantly feel connected
Yes.
because you know a small percentage of what they're going through.
Right.
So just offering to be there, offering to connect them to services,
Mhm.
that's huge.
So this is your job now.
Mhm.
Do you still have time to volunteer at random things that you're doing? And
I
I know you said
do.
that
Yeah,
Chase enjoys doing that now too?
I do. Yeah. And actually, so I've been with a couple organizations now over the last 5 years. And Chase was actually a speaker at a gala/golf tournament event in Florida
What?
a
That's
year
awesome.
after. And he was 11 and he spoke in front of 450 corporate executives from around the globe and shared his story. And so he's done things like that. And then we just volunteered at a pediatric event for my organization a few months ago.
Mhm.
And, we weren't doing anything fancy. He wasn't sharing his story, but he wanted to be there.
Yeah.
And so it was a hot day in the sun. It was a long day
Mm.
volunteering, but he wanted to go with me.
Yeah.
And so it's those kind of things that now with my job, I don't always talk about it all the time at home to my family.
Yeah. It's just
Because at
what's
the end
what
of the
you
day,
do.
it's cancer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it can be a bit hard to
Sure.
discuss and hear all these stories about, various people affected, but
Mhm.
things like that were those events. And then I know my husband has volunteered multiple times. My daughter's come out and volunteered.
Mhm.
So it's been really nice to be able to have those experiences as a family
Yes.
and know that, yes, we are so fortunate to be where we are. So how do we pay that forward?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just be there for others. So it's been really, really neat.
Well, and that's a one way. Okay, first of all, I'm just going to go back to the speaking as an 11-year-old in front of
It was
400 people is just what?
phenomenal, phenomenal. And I think all the time, I'm like, that experience was so much of a gift to him
Yeah.
because, as an 11-year-old to know that you can do those hard things,
Right.
like what a huge life lesson.
And what can't you do after this?
Exactly. And I saw him, handle this room of all those people. And
Yeah.
I thought this could just really change his trajectory because knowing that he's done that, like you said, what else can't he do then?
Yeah.
So
It
even
builds that
though
confidence.
exactly. So even though, he's 15 now, he doesn't like to
Mhm.
share his story a lot.
Mhm.
Um,
Understandably.
I really feel like in his future, it'll come full circle
Yeah.
because what I saw him do at that young age, like he can be that change maker, he can be that advocate. And it was remarkable.
Yes. Tell me about the 1-year anniversary.
Yeah.
August
So
8th of 2019.
yeah, we still that date still burns in my soul,
Yeah.
right? When
I'm
you
sorry, I
see it
should have
coming.
paid someone
No,
else.
no, it's
Yeah.
okay. I mean,
Oh,
if anything, I think we celebrated his 1 year finishing treatment
okay.
more
Okay.
than the diagnosis
I
day.
got you. Yeah.
Yep. So that day when he rang the bell, it was a year later that we celebrated with friends and family, and
What date was
you
that?
know, I think it was December 19th.
Okay. December
Yeah,
19th.
I know,
Write it
I
down.
know, I know. So,
Yeah.
so to us, that was more that celebratory day
Yeah. That
instead of
makes
diagnosis day.
total
Yeah.
sense because I think about all of this. I mean, you can breathe. We have that behind us. Like in him
Hmm.
as an athlete, whatever sport he's playing, like that quarter is behind me. I'm moving
Hmm.
forward into the next one.
Yep.
And it brings
Exactly.
hope and some purpose and God, the
Hmm.
maturity that I think the children that go through this have to develop and have to
Hmm.
that's pushed on them that they have to grow through really quickly
Yeah.
is it's incredible.
It is. It is. Like I said, he still has some worry and fear too. If
Yes.
weird symptoms come up and you see him instantly being grounded back
Yeah.
to ground zero. And that's
Mhm.
heartbreaking because then you do as well as a parent.
Yeah.
But his oncologist has assured us like once you get to the 5 year mark, that's a huge, huge kind of momentous time. And she said the percentage is almost zero. She's
Oh,
like,
that's
I
great.
can't say like guaranteed, but she's like almost zero.
Oh,
So
that's great. That's you'll take that.
oh my gosh, yes. And so we were actually transitioned, his care was transitioned to what they call the Hope Clinic this last year,
Okay.
meaning it's more monitoring for side effects down the road
Okay.
than the active clinic.
So that was my next question. What his prognosis? His does
Mhm.
how often does he go to the doctor? You said now he gets checked once every
Once a
year.
year. Mhm.
Okay.
Yep,
How
yeah.
soon after he was finished? Was it still every month? Was it every 3 months?
It
What's
was every month, then every 3 months, then 6 months, then every year. So they
okay.
kinda just slowly work you up. But I know, like, when we recently had that scare, even though we're transitioned to a different physician now in the Hope
Mhm.
Clinic, I emailed his oncologist. She responded with less than an hour.
Oh, it's great.
She's like, "If it would help you, we'll get him in today."
Oh, wow.
So also knowing that you have a team, a facility
Yes.
that will be there if
Still
anything does
there.
come up
Yeah.
and or just to reassure you
Yes.
is huge.
Yeah. I don't know that all doctors necessarily have that manner of
No,
treatment?
and I think that a lot of the doctors are phenomenal at
Mhm.
that facility.
Mhm.
Of course, we are partial to his physician.
Yeah.
And then one really neat full circle moment is with my job and my current organization. We're actually funding his doctor in a research study, in a
Oh,
$500,000 research study. So when
oh,
I heard that,
that's
right,
great.
it was just like, oh my gosh, that's phenomenal.
It just makes sense.
So
Oh, well,
yeah,
that's a gift. What a
yeah,
gift
yeah.
for
So
all of you. What a gift.
yeah.
Gosh. Um, so he's happy. He's healthy. He's in a big school. He's back to
He
his
is.
regular gig.
He is. He's loving it. I mean, we
Good.
still monitor for those side effects because
Yeah.
pediatric, when kids get those really hard drugs at a young age,
Mhm.
they kind of keep a close eye on that. So he plays basketball. He's not super tall, but that's okay. He's
Okay.
fast. And we always wonder, we're like, was that the cancer drugs that kind of
Oh,
altered his
oh,
growth, or was that going to be his path anyway?
it's a really interesting
So
question.
that is like one thing that kind of is, stays on his mind because
Yeah.
he wishes he
He
was
wants to be six
taller.
foot five.
But
Yeah.
you know what? He's making up for. He's hitting the weight room. He's doing everything he needs to still be at the top of his game and be a top competitor.
Good.
So
So
yeah.
he's motivated.
Oh, he's very motivated. Yeah,
So motivated. He was even before any of this happened.
he
So it
was.
makes complete sense to me that he would be that way afterwards, especially after going through something that
Mhm.
had him mature in such a quick manner. Yeah.
Well, and he's very wise beyond his years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
What are some of the things that doctors are concerned with him downline? That not necessarily about it coming back, but you
Mhm.
said they're
There
monitoring
are.
side effects. So if you
Yeah,
get pediatric cancer, what and yours specifically, I know everyone is a little bit different, but for
correct.
Chase,
Hmm.
what are the specifics that they are concerned about with him as he ages?
Yeah. So heart issues.
Okay.
They
From
want
the
to make
drug.
sure from the drugs.
Yeah.
Yep. And then fertility. We don't know what that
Okay.
looks like
Mhm.
down the road for him. That's
Yeah.
not something, he's 15. We're not worrying about it right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so yeah, those are kind of the like two biggest things. Of course,
Mhm.
they keep an eye on there are some kids that have vision, hearing impairments, cognitive impairments. Thankfully, that has not been an issue for him.
It's great. Yeah.
So yeah, just
So
continuing to keep an eye on things.
yeah. And you will be. And
Mhm.
as a mom and as a dad, you guys will be hyper vigilant, I'm sure, for
Mhm.
the rest of your lives of over
Definitely.
what's going on. And it's natural, naturally.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I mean, I think that at some point, maybe because we're still in that crazy race of raising kids,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that maybe one day when they find their path and they're out of the house, maybe my husband and I will have time to like sit and process, like because
Oh,
I think we just ran back into things, right? You
yeah.
just get thrown back in and
That's
work
it.
and
Well,
kids and school and
mhm.
so that is one thing that I can say that we probably should have set time aside for, but we
Mhm.
just I hate to say it, right? You just don't
I
have
don't
time.
I don't know that there was time based on what
No.
just based on your trajectory, as you said earlier, based on how things went so quickly, I don't know that there was. I think
Mhm.
you had to kind of put yourselves over in a box.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
um,
so I'm sure we have a lot of those, emotions buried deep.
yeah, yeah. Do
I was
any
a
of
little
them?
nervous about how I would do today if I would keep it
Oh,
together, but so far it's done okay.
no, you're very
So maybe one day we'll open those boxes that are buried deep and
yeah.
process it. But at the same time, we're just grateful to be where we are and
Mhm.
have him healthy and have him with us and
Yes.
just
Amen.
appreciate the
Yeah.
small things.
Yeah. Do any of those emotions pop up randomly for you now? Like you talked about a friend calling you just randomly
Mhm.
and just it just hit her.
Yeah, I mean, obviously at some of these events,
Oh, right. Yeah.
there will be moments like
Mhm.
we had at one of our events a dove release to remember all the kiddos that had been lost.
Oh,
Man, I was running that event and I always warned people like on the mic, it's just going to be a mess for a few minutes. Please
yeah.
forgive me.
Yeah.
So even though that's not our story, I can very easily put myself in those parents' shoes. And so I just can break down easily.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, things like that. Just hearing other people's stories, I think that it just kind of brings it back up.
mhm. Yeah. Shared experiences. I think there's benefit in healing
Hmm.
by sharing them, but also benefit in hearing them and being a part of other people's experience where it's a shared process you're all
Hmm.
together. Yeah. Yeah.
Correct.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
you've done an amazing job talking about all of this. I'm so thankful that you were so open with your information about what your process was and with what Chase went through, with what your family went through. I mean, it's no small feat at all.
Yep.
Um, and your honesty and your vulnerability, I think, is really, really great because I don't know. I mean, I agree. I think that there'll come a time when you'll go, okay, I can breathe.
Yes,
Raising kids is hard.
it
You're
is.
right in the thick of it yet. Yeah, you have a
Mhm.
senior, so
I
one will
do.
be, which is
I
crazy to
do.
think you have a senior.
I know. I
What?
know. It is crazy. It is.
So that may give you a little bit of space when she goes her
Mhm.
way and finds her space that she's going to. But
Mhm.
yeah, you did great, great.
Thank you. Well,
Mhm.
thank you for helping me share the message and the importance for pediatric cancer. I greatly appreciate the space and the platform. And
Yeah, absolutely.
as a friend, you were there during it, reaching out, even though we were in different states. So I appreciate you on many levels,
Oh,
Dawn. So thank you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. I do, before you go away though, I want to end with some rapid fire questions just
Okay.
because I want to lighten it just a little bit
Hmm.
and also let people know a little bit more about you as a person. I think that's
Yeah.
cool because if someone's hearing this and they need to connect, whether they're in
Hmm.
your area or any area across the United States, just
Hmm.
I think it's important for them to know that there are people like you or
Hmm.
there is you that have
Hmm.
experienced this that can help, can have that shared experience and
Hmm.
know what they're going through and be able to,
Yeah.
um, yeah, just be able to be beside them through the process. So, yeah, so we're
Yeah.
going to lighten it up so people get to know you a little bit
Okay.
more on a different level, right? All right, so I'm going to ask
Perfect.
you like 4 or 5 different rapid fire questions here.
Okay.
First question: what is your favorite month of the year?
I would say July. I love summer. I love the heat.
Okay.
And it's that time before school, right?
Yes.
You kind of get that July 4th extended holiday time.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I love doing all things outdoors in the warm sun.
God,
So
you've always been an outdoorsy girl. You and your
I have.
husband.
Yeah.
You've always
Yeah.
been outdoors. So how hot does it get in Denver on July 4th?
Oh, it could be like mid 90s, low 90s.
Okay. So it's
Yeah.
not because I just think, well, you just talked earlier about it snowing today,
I know
6
it's
to 10
crazy.
inches
It's
in
crazy.
October. So I'm just,
We
well,
have
you're
every season here, sometimes during the wrong season.
understand. All right. Number 2, what is your favorite workout or exercise to do?
So I've really gotten into yoga the last few years.
Oh, it's so good.
I know I still do
Yay.
a lot of weightlifting, TRX, body resistant training.
Mhm.
And then I would just say walking my dog. We got a puppy a couple months ago.
Oh,
So I need to
and
get
a
her
dog?
exercise.
Oh,
She's a
what?
rescue. She's a cattle mix, a cattle dog mix, pointer mix.
Those are
She's got a
smart
lot of
dogs
energy.
with a lot of energy, but they're
So we
so
do a
smart.
lot of walking right now. I
Perfect.
do. Not
Perfect.
today in the snow. I actually tried this morning and she was like, nah, I'm not doing
Not
this.
having it. Bless. She's like, "It's too cold. I'm gonna stay
Too
inside."
cold. Yeah.
Mhm. All right, number 3, how do you usually answer the phone when it rings?
Just hello.
Oh, nothing like, "Hi there."
No,
"Hello."
just
Okay.
standard.
Okay.
Boring, just the usual.
Okay, well, that's gonna be for the next time I call you or talk to you, I'm gonna challenge you to come up with a
Oh
crazy,
my
crazy
gosh.
phone.
Okay, I'll do it.
We'll do it. All right, number 4, what are 3 words that someone would use to describe you?
I probably hardworking. I like to just keep going. I'm a hustler. I'm
I
always doing
agree.
many things at one time.
Yeah,
I would say empathetic.
totally. Yes.
Um, and I would say supportive. No matter what someone's going through, I try to see what I can do to help her.
I agree with all of those 110%.
Oh, thank
Even
you.
before you went through that's
Mhm.
I think that's kind of your innate nature.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so
It's in
too.
you. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Number 5. What is your most strongly held belief?
So a couple things that I always talk to my kids about is to be accepting of anyone and everyone.
Yeah.
I'm really, really, that's a huge value for me.
Yeah.
And then the other, I'm a huge animal lover. So
Yes.
speaking of my new puppy, I am people should rescue, not shop.
Yes. Yes.
So
We have a
that is my other
rescue.
thing. Now, does my dog have a few quirks that we're trying to get through because of her background? Yes. But you know what? Like that is one of my large passions
Yeah.
is there are too many animals out there
Mhm.
that are in desperate need of homes. And
Mhm.
so I would never go anywhere else but a shelter or a rescue
Yeah.
to get an animal. So being open-minded to anyone and everyone and then supporting those animals.
Yeah. I will tell you, our rescue dog that we have, she's closing on 11 years old now. Oh,
Oh,
we got her when she was 3 months old. And I like we spent $35 to get her.
yep. Yep.
She's the best $35 we've ever spent,
Yes.
ever.
Yes.
She's the
I know.
best.
We
Like, we
had another
appreciate you.
rescue dog that we just lost in July. She was 15 years old, and same
Oh,
thing. We had her when the kids were young.
yeah.
Best dog ever.
Yeah.
And so I know this one will be someday too.
I just gotta
She's
get
just in the process. She had a hard start to life, and that's
Mhm.
okay. But that's why we wanted to, adopt her and
Yeah.
again be part of the solution, right?
Yes.
So
Amen.
yeah,
Amen. So good. So good. All the good stuff here, Laura. I am so, so happy for you and your family. I'm
thank
so
you very
happy to
much.
face. Yeah. And I'm also happy that you found another passion because I would say that fitness was a passion for you and it still is.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
gosh, how many of us get to find more than one passion in our life to be able to exist in?
mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
so if there had to be a blessing, I didn't ask you this during the
Mhm.
meat and potatoes of it, but like, what would you think the blessing is for you for all of this? As a mom, as a person, as a wife, as a mother, all of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think having perspective is number
Mhm.
one.
Okay.
Just because going through that, it really changes how you view your day-to-day life and the world around you.
Yeah, yeah.
And then too, it has been that change of careers. I don't think I ever would have had the courage to look into anything else.
Ah, yeah.
But when you all of a sudden have this passion, you can really make anything happen. And so that kind of gave me, I'd always been wondering what else I would do,
Mhm.
right? And kind of thinking that there might be something else. I just didn't know what or when or how.
Mhm.
And so even though it was very, very difficult path to get there, it really showed me that those translational skills I could use from my former job, how I could use them in a new career. So that has also been a huge blessing.
I love it.
And
I
of
love
course,
it.
my family and Chase being here and
Yeah,
with
yeah.
us and all of that. So,
Yeah, for sure. But I love it.
yeah.
For me, it's the
Mhm,
perspective thing sticks really hard for me.
mhm,
I think
mhm.
that's really amazing. And what a blessing for you to be telling the story. And I'm so, so thrilled that you agreed. So
No, thank you for asking me. It's been
yeah.
it's been my pleasure.
Well, I hope that you go outside and you can get what's your new dog's name?
Dottie.
Dottie. I hope Dottie can get acclimated to the snow.
She came with that name because she is spotted, and I'm
Okay.
like, we're gonna just run with it because she
Yes.
knows that is her name. So Miss Dottie.
So hopefully Miss Dottie will go outside to use the restroom in the 6 to 10 inches of
Yeah.
snow that she's getting, and you're gonna be
If
okay. It's
not, I
gonna get
might be
stuck.
carrying her out there, but that's okay too.
No. The things we do for
The
our
things we
loved
do.
ones.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
That's right. Well,
Well,
thank you so much, Dawn.
you are so welcome, Laura. I hope that you guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And I
Thank
look forward
you.
to staying in touch with you and keeping updates on what's going on with you and your kids and your husband.
Sounds good. Appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thanks, Laura.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. If you have an idea for an interview or you would like to share your own story, I would love to hear from you. Send me a message at dawn@thesoulgoals.com. If you enjoyed today's podcast, I'd love for you to leave a review and to consider following and subscribing to the show. With weekly releases, there is always another interesting story to be heard. I do hope that today's guests and their words have helped to bring some extra light to your day and encouraged you to find a deeper space of your very own soul goals. Until next time, friends, remember that everyone has a story, and every story matters.